I guess Teams is now a mature product.
Yeah, stable product. Okay, there we go. Recording has kicked off. Okay, so welcome everyone to the July 2022 Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. My name's Mark O'Shea, and I'll let Steve and Ben introduce themselves.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Ben.
So they're nice and easy. So if you want to see either, on my case, I guess, cat photos, you can look at my Twitter feed. For intelligent stuff, you can probably look at Steve or Ben's.
Not mine. Not mine, Ben's.
Cat photos and cat videos are always but they're my ones. So I'm not just recycling other people's ones. So
sure.
fresh content is
not your neighbour's cat at all.
Well, I paid the vet bills for her on the weekend.
So I was going to ask
she is that. Now my cat.
Yes.
So you took your neighbour's cat to the vet?
Yes.
This is now your cat.
My neighbour has yet to ask me anything about how much it costs.
Nice.
And I'll say it's better that you don't. It's better that none of you know.
Did you get the chip updated to your address?
Yes. that happened today on the checkup. So yeah, when she gets scanned, it now says me.
Nice.
And it was a bit suspicious that I didn't know the surname of my neighbours. But it's like, funny. Oh well, that's life. Okay, so we've got a fairly straightforward one session today. There'll probably be a bunch of demos, or not probably, there will be a lot of demos, but just the first thing, we normally just kick off on the next slide with anyone who's new or someone who hasn't appeared for a while. If you just want to do a quick introduction, either in chat or if you want to unmute. And then after we just go through some of those things, we'll jump in and take a look at the M365. Actually, Steve was sort of talking about not abbreviating things. So I won't call it the M365 Apps Admin Center. I'll call it the Microsoft 365 Apps Admin Center.
Very good.
I am not going to be able to keep that up. So I guess then just quickly, anyone who either hasn't been around for a while or hasn't appeared previously, just sort of drop in where you're located, the temperature, where you're, so let us know, is there sun or is it rain? And just like a little bit about yourself or probably your role and why you're here. But otherwise, it looks like we've got quite a few returnees in here.
Yeah, sure. I'll kick off. So hello, everyone. I'm Dominic. So
hi, Dominic.
Old colleagues of Steve and Ben. And then after having the pleasure of working with them, I took a year off to do Telstra's grad program. So I did a bit of software engineering, did a bit of network engineering, and then decided I still like EUC better. So I've been part of the EUC engineering team for about 4 months. I guess I'm back because as with any corporate, we're a couple of years behind the ball. So one of the many ways to keep in touch with what's new and what's fresh. Temperatures 13 degrees in Sydney and impeding rain forever.
So after we stop recording at the end of the session, I can share your employer's EUC stories that I've had to deal with over the years.
Nice.
But please do. Right now. Can't wait.
It's oh no, things are a lot better.
Anyway,
or they couldn't be worse.
Yes.
Well, I've joined, so it's worse now.
Anybody else have any want to do introductions so Mark doesn't incriminate himself on video?
Yeah.
Any more than he already has.
Oh no, it's nothing bad. On my side.
Maybe I'll be jumping now.
You go.
This is Narain. I have a bit of experience with working with I used to work with the transport for a while and then Department of Education and in the public sector, and now currently working for Suncorp and other small organizations. So there was about like SME kind of organizations where mostly involved into the migrating into the cloud-only strategies, and I used to attend. I used to follow all you guys, and I really has. I mean, I'm really glad to meet you again. There is a lot of reasons because I'm just finding a slot to bring lot of my team to aware of that what's been happening in the Microsoft world and what's been changing it and how it's been changing it and to be honest, nowadays Microsoft's been investing a lot of efforts in it and to bring new technologies on board, but people still, or even I would say, organizations, they still don't realize that what the benefit they can, the total cost of ownership or velocity, how they can increase it, or those sort of things, right? So yeah, so I'm just starting to join you guys again to build that, to the IP. Yeah.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. Welcome.
And yeah, and Ahmed sort of dropped into chat that he's on desktop engineer and system engineering in Doha.
Awesome.
So yeah, we got people from quite a fair way out of our location, out of our time zone. So welcome everyone.
I think Robert's trying to say something.
Oh,
there,
sorry.
Mark.
Yeah, sorry, I've been trying to get in.
Still good.
I'm Robert. I'm based in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales. It's
Hi,
a
Robert.
very cold 9 degrees here. So
Nice. You beat Melbourne.
Not hard.
Do we have anyone from Canberra? Because I'm sure they will have a very low
Colder
score
number
today.
That's a
Yeah.
trick
Yes.
question, Mark. Canberra doesn't exist.
It's just an outer suburb of Sydney.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been in EUC roles for the last 5.5 years. I've worked in Canberra actually for the ANU and some high schools there, and then I moved to Sydney to work at Cochlear for 4.5 years, and just moved into a EUC engineering role with Wesfarmers.
Oh, nice.
So, Wesfarmers Industrial Safety. So yeah, I'm here because I need to learn more about Intune. The Intune side of things, as I've been mainly an application packager with SCCM, so trying to learn modern ways of doing things.
Nice.
Excellent. So being based in the Blue Mountains, do you do most of your work remotely?
Yeah, so we're currently doing 4 days remote, one commuting to Greystanes, which is near Parramatta.
Yep.
And yeah, it's a good divide in a way. Sometimes it's hard to work remotely, especially testing things. But
yeah.
So thank God I've got a good NBN connection here in the Blue Mountains.
You're the one. I knew someone had to have it.
So did you know you can get NBN to upgrade your fiber for free now? Upgrade to fiber for free.
So our street's being updated. So they're dropping in a lot of extra fiber runs in our street at the moment. So
nice.
It looks like it's on the horizon. It's not.
Yeah. So I was going to say this to you privately, Steve. How long do you think, just because you can get it for free, how long do you think that's going to take?
12 months.
12 months?
Because it'll probably be via Dom's employer.
I think that's a very aspirational goal. 12 months.
Hey. NBN's head office is literally like 50 meters away.
Yeah, and how good's your internet right now?
Anyway,
yes.
I digress.
Yeah, we can have an NBN conversation when we stop recording.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, actually, with some of the changes that are happening around fiber, etc., it's probably something we need to cover off at some point. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else trying to do an intro? Doesn't look like it. So in that case, so what we thought we'd cover off tonight is just sort of going through quite a bit more of the Microsoft 365 apps admin center And even though we've touched upon parts of it in previous meetups, we haven't really gone through it end to end. So I think we've kind of spoken about the OneDrive reporting capabilities quite a while ago. So I think Steve went through some of that stuff. We went through, like a few months back, we went through some of the, or basically now that we can sort of target devices for monthly enterprise rollouts through it, but we haven't really gone through everything, or I don't want to say everything, we probably won't get time to go through everything it can do, but it's constantly evolving. There's always new stuff being rolled into it. So I thought it was probably a good idea to have a look at it, because the reality is that I don't think most people know that this exists. People know config.office.com, and most people use it to create an XML file. A lot of them don't even bother signing in, because they're like, why would I want to centrally store this somewhere, or what's it going to give me? And once you sign in, it's like, oh, this is something completely different to what I was expecting. Mm-hmm. So let's just sort of jump in then to, what is it? And we'll cover off, we won't go through the bottom pieces here in any detail yet. We've got plenty of time to go through those in a lot more detail with demos, etc. But I guess just the important thing is, why is there another management portal? Which is always a good conversation. And I think a few of us will probably have some different takes on this. But for me, it's really a matter of, as much as portal consolidation is good, like I am not complaining about all the different things that have rolled into the M365 Defender portal. Most recently, Azure, not Azure ATP, Defender for Identity, rolled into it. So basically, so I don't have to use that old portal any longer. But in this case, it's like, when you do look at when this portal consolidation happens, you have to think about, who are they targeting with that? Now, if we think about something like a lot of IT people, this is probably going to be another portal they might have to use. Mm-hmm. But it also means, though, that for people who work in larger orgs, or those of you who really are just much more focused on, I don't want to say just focused on Office on the desktop. I know there are some orgs that are big enough that that's probably a person, maybe a person or two or more. But team. So giving them a portal where anything Office is there, as opposed to them having to potentially, jump into Intune and get confused by all this other stuff that Intune is doing, or having to do stuff in Config Manager and Intune and Group Policy, and
or the admin.microsoft.com portal, which is designed for your global admin, not designed for somebody who should have limited access.
Yeah, it's not a general management portal.
Yeah. So the fact that it's a specialized one means that, I guess it puts us in a situation where, yes, there is stuff in it that would be great to expose in Endpoint Manager, but I guess it's a timing issue. I think it's okay to say that the team, Steve's putting his head down. Steve doesn't want to be part of this. I think I know this is something that's in one of the Intune training recordings from the Office Rangers, saying that they're looking at where they can integrate this into integrate some of the reporting, etc., into places where it makes sense, because they know it's great to have it centralized for the Office people, but it means that for people who have got more general purpose roles or general device management roles, including the devices and the apps, then decentralizing it does become a bit more problematic.
Yep.
So anything you want to add, Steve or Ben or anyone else, as to why, why does this exist?
Probably the one thing I'll call out here is part of why this exists as the Microsoft 365 Apps Admin Center is it's managing the app, and it's not just on your devices, but even on your end users' devices. So as in, if I BYOD and sign into Outlook, it will force me to have the latest version, or enforce any security and compliance rules that I have through this. So it's based on the user signing in. So it's not using the Intune channel for those policies. It's not using the Defender channel for those policies.
Yeah.
So why is that important and why is that getting called out? Well, it's getting called out because we are pushing policies down via the Office 365 or the Microsoft 365 for apps endpoint rather than having it coming down that Intune. So that's why you've got those separation of duties. What you're starting to see, and this is where it's interesting, is on the security side and the Intune side, they're starting to blend those policies together in the MEMAC portal.
Yeah.
And what you'll see, and it's a journey, it's the walk, crawl, run, is you'll start seeing some of this appearing across in the M365 portal. Sorry, in the MEMAC portal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get there.
And if we're all getting confused, then yeah, no, just understand that it is a confusing process to have multiple portals. I've definitely run into customers who have had 3 or 4 different Office 365 deployment packages in different portals, and they are all working just fine, side by side. But no one can comfortably know where the thing is coming from. So, you know, be aware that this stuff is important to get right.
Yeah. And I've just dropped the admin portals or the msportals.io at the one that Adam Fowler put together, which is kind of...
He's still maintaining it.
Oh, yeah. So it's kind of overwhelming, but the reality is most people aren't going to need more than a handful of what's on that list.
Yeah.
Like the
What do you mean you don't need the Kazala management portal?
that still exists. Oh yeah, I still see the icon, so I guess it does. Okay, so just a couple of things then, that in a lot of what we'll cover off here, as long as you've got a business/enterprise license for the Office apps /M365 apps, it seems as if there's not an official standard as to when I should use Microsoft 365 apps or versus Office apps. They kind of seem just to be used randomly in current documentation. But I just want to mention here that there are some places that I'll call out that there is going to be some differences between the functionality that you get if you're pushing any of the Microsoft 365 business SKUs. So business standard or business premium, for example. They do have some restrictions there versus what you get on the enterprise side, but it's nothing new to this service. They're just basically they are restrictions that are inherited, and we'll talk about those once we get to it. But then for the rest of the pieces, this is just basically the order that we'll cover everything off in based on slides and some demonstrations as we go through here. But as I mentioned, really the big one that most people who know about this site, generally they know it because of the Office customization tool. So how do we go through and create custom XML files? We'll take a look at it, and we'll also jump in and show you that there's a bunch of stuff behind the scenes you can do in here as well. And that's where we start getting into all of the other things that we've got listed in here. So let's just jump in then, first of all, and just have a quick talk about it, and then we'll have a quick look. So rather than just going over to config.office.com, we actually need to sign in to see all of the functionality. And the number of people that where I'll show them config.office.com, and they're like, I didn't know this thing even existed. I've been handcrafting XML files for the last X number of years. That's still pretty, that's still pretty common feedback that you get. Now, in terms of the roles that you'll need once you are signing in, so obviously global admin is going to get you in, security admin, but there's also the new Office Apps admin role, which I think was added in, is it like 4 or 5 months ago? Roughly, I think. Does it sound good? Yeah.
It sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah, let's assume it was 4 to 5 months ago, plus or minus 6 months on either side. Now, one of the challenges that you're going to have with this, when you first start looking at it is that there's overlap with other management tools. And in some cases, the overlap isn't actually overlap. It's exactly the same functionality being exposed in multiple places. But in other cases, you kind of just need to make a decision. Where are you going to be doing this? And part of that could be based on, once again, what the role is, the focus. But what you'll see is that there's, and what Steve mentioned about this really targeting the user for policies, etc., rather than targeting the device. It means that there's a lot of additional stuff, a lot of additional insight that we start being able to pull out of this. So we'll talk about some of the overlap when we get into those different sections. But once you spend a little bit of time with it, like there are some things where you'll have to change your way of thinking if you've already been doing certain things through Config Manager or through Intune, for example, or like obviously if you're using group policy, you're going to have to change at some point anyway. But here it's really, at first it's like, why am I doing the same thing in different locations? The idea is don't do the same things in different locations. If this tool does it, at this point in time, the recommendation is probably look at how this tool does it and look at what benefits it gives you and decide, is it worth moving over to this? And that, I think that's fairly, like, I'm trying to think of how to position it, but I don't think there's anything that I said that would really conflict with anything that the team behind this would really say, unless Steve wants to call something out that where I have misspoken here. Okay, so one more slide, and then we can jump in and start going through more demo pieces here. But this is where I just wanted to get some of the licensing pieces out of the way pretty early on, because there's always going to be like at least one of you in attendance, and it's not actually who I was expecting to be here today. So hopefully someone else falls into this category. But any of you who are pushing or you've got customers using Microsoft 365 apps for business. So whether just as the base standard version or whether through Business Premium, there are going to be some restrictions there around that. So if we take a look in here, you'll see that Microsoft Apps 365 Apps for Business Basic, it doesn't support Office Cloud Policy. The enterprise versions do. But once you get into the apps, M365 Apps for Business Standard and Premium, it supports a subset of policies. Now let's just talk about what the issue is here. Why doesn't it support all of the policies? The problem here is that this is something that basically this tool it's limited by what Business Standard and Business Premium can offer. So Standard and Premium versions of your M365 apps don't include group policy support. So if you think about what you're normally targeting through group policy or through policies in Intune, for example, that stuff can't be applied to Business Standard or Business Premium anyway. So it's not that this tool is artificially restricting you, it's those versions of Office do have those restrictions in place there. So just watch out with that one.
I thought everybody had E5.
Of course they do. Yeah, so E3 versus E5, isn't, so, or even if we turn it back into, if you've got, let's use old product naming. Any of the O365 or M365 SKUs that include what used to be Office 365 Pro Plus, they're all good.
Everybody gets Pro Plus, right?
No. Business Standard and Business Premium do not get Pro Plus.
I use Windows 10 with Bing.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so, but otherwise, in terms of the license that you're using, as long as you're not using a consumer version of Office, then this is going to, you're not really going to see too many, or any real differences apart from in this policy setting. So so even here, like I was actually surprised to see that that business actually had any support in these policies at all. I was just expecting that to be E3/E5 options only, but nope. There's minimal capabilities or some capabilities, which is always better than nothing.
Well, then this would be about making sure that they're up to date, making sure that they are secure. It's part of why MFA is included in these base licenses now, because minimum level of compliance, because Microsoft got sick of being called out for being insecure because people didn't patch.
Mhm.
Let's be very clear about that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start off with, I guess, the big one. So let me just get rid of that so we can see the page. Now, so how many of you have been to config.office.com, clicked on create or import without ever clicking on sign in?
Me, always.
Oh, what's wrong with you? You didn't need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so I get, at least the thing that makes me happy here is when you do click on sign in, at least it signs you in the user context that you're already in the browser as.
That's cool.
As opposed to it taking you to a sign in page like Business Store.
Anyway, I'm not going to go down that path.
You would prefer it to prompt you?
Yes, because
Edge has profiles, Steve.
Oh no. I use profiles, but it auto signs in with the account that is associated with my OS, no matter the browser that I open up with, even if I have different profiles.
Fantastic. So it's done something that a lot of people have wanted and you do not like.
Yeah, but
yeah, cool.
I think that could be because of random configuration.
Potentially.
Is this in your employer's tenant or in your? It's not ADFS and SSO hijacking it all, is it? Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
NDA.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So for the rest of us, for other people, for most of the world, it's a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't actually want to be on this the page where I'm actually signed in. I actually just want to be here first. So really, what this tool started off as was where you could go through, you could create a new configuration, and some of the things that you'll see in here is that, effectively, it's the things that we used to have to hand edit in our own XML files for the Office deployment tool. We could go through, populate a bunch of things in here. Now, let's just talk about some of the things that are different in here versus what you can do over in Intune, for example. Now, on the config manager side, this is what you'll see. Any of you who are using config manager who don't really use Intune, you already know this UI if you've deployed M365 apps, because this is it just pops up inside of config manager. Yeah. And you're good to go. Now, some of the things that are different versus what you'll see on Intune, though, is on Intune, you're not going to see M365 apps for business or any of the LTC stuff. So basically, you get
How many people here are actually deploying LTSC?
Anyone? Show of hands.
Bueller? Good.
Cool. When we finish this, Mark, I want to clarify.
Here we go. We got one. Ahmed.
Got one. Nice.
Interesting. I'd be curious to know the use case there, Ahmed.
Yes. Hi. We usually dedicate them for the medical desktops, which require these
makes sense.
Apps installed in Windows. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that is the explicit use case that we highly recommend it for.
Yeah.
It's just interesting when we see it in other organizations where they've gone, oh, I need this because I don't want to make change for my end user, or I don't want online stuff. So that's actually the perfect use case, and I love that you're using it in that scenario.
Awesome.
Yeah. So this gives you obviously gives you a bit more flexibility for creating those XML files, but let's just sort of stick to enterprise. If we wanted to add Visio, etc. in. Now, other things that it does is, especially if you do need to do things like target specific, I've got to switch away from current channel. Let's go to what we should be talking about to set the stage for monthly enterprise channel, because that'll be an important one coming up. Mm-hmm. So obviously we've got new monthly enterprise channel released today, 2205. So in this case, this is sort of just showing you which ones we can actually target in there. Now, I don't know if this strictly means that these versions are actually supported. I think at least the first two are. The third one, that looks more like a minor variation than anything else.
I think there was a critical update required to Office.
Yeah, because
that's why it did the outer band from 2204 to 20204.
Yeah, because that's what I was looking at this going, this kind of seems like it. Normally we'd only see two, because normally with monthly enterprise, you'd only have last month and this month in here. So but last month had two, therefore we've got two. Okay, so let's just keep that on latest. Now, other things as well is, the same things. Let's just
you definitely need to enable OneDrive Groove.
I have to, just through OCD, I just need to turn off access.
Yeah, no, you're doing it
and
right.
Publisher.
Oh yeah, because Publisher is just like a dead product that they keep dropping in, isn't it? Like they haven't updated Publisher for X number of years, X being 10 probably.
I know.
Years.
So we also need to enable Skype for Business because we don't want Teams.
No, we're trying to make this workable. Okay, now, so one of the things though where I guess this really started to become a requirement was handcrafting it when it was just, probably 20 or 30 lines long in your XML file to go through and do just a basic deployment. That's one thing. But it's once we get down into being able to control all of the deployments, deploying all the application preferences, which is effectively the same as what we'll see when we look at the online policy. Like this is where you do not want to have to put all of this stuff into an XML file yourself. Yeah. So this is
like the old MSTs.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
So there's no shortage of them. I'll use one of my favorite examples as we get a little bit further through as to something that should not be allowed in an org. But once we go through and finish this, we can go through. We can export it. So I probably need to, let me see if it will let me export it yet. I might need to drop in a few more details. It's telling me that I need a few more. But basically what we can do from here is we can go through, we can export it. We can actually save, once we sort of get inside the portal, you can see that we can actually save configurations inside of config.office.com. And what that means is once we've got them, we can actually point setup to the URL rather than actually downloading those files. That's not something that I've ever really done. I haven't had a need to do that, but it's something that makes a lot of sense in terms of trying to keep things consistent and to prevent you from tweaking versions on one system versus another and then wondering why. So just even in looking at it in terms of, I know it's not really source control, but at least it's a centralized version as opposed to random versions of something XML floating around all over the place on your network.
Version 1.1.AZ.
Yeah. So
never seen that ever.
No. So this is what most people would sort of know the Office customization. So if people do know this tool, 100%, this is 99.9% would know that this is what it can do. But it's that second part once we sign in that people don't realize what's there. But let's just sort of go back to make sure that we've covered off everything that's over here on that slide before we jump off. So we'll take a look at the stored XML configuration files in a moment. You'll see how we could either download them later if we need them. Alternatively, if we do want it, it will sort of give us the instructions to point to the XML, the hosted XML file for us. Now, other things to note in here is something that hasn't changed with this tool, the same as within Intune or within Config Manager, at least, you can't directly target people for beta channel. So anyone that you really want on, what used to be Insider Fast, well, I guess it's still technically Insider Fast. You'd need to sort of just create an XML file for one, or edit an existing XML file locally to go through and put beta in it. But you've got to remember, and this is something we covered a couple of months back, was if you're putting someone into beta, then you're basically pushing updates out or new Office builds on a monthly basis. And they don't necessarily do a great job with delivery or with differential updating. So it's not something where it's going to be 50 to 100 meg each week. More likely it's going to be around 900 meg for that user each week, which in some environments isn't going to be too much of an issue, but for some orgs, obviously that's something that could lead to a little bit of chaos.
Yeah.
Now, other things that we sort of saw in that portal is that it does support the business SKUs. It does support the LTSC/perpetual versions, which Intune doesn't expose. And also, like as I mentioned, that we can actually point it, so once we download ODT, rather than using local XML files, we can just point it to the URL. Now I can sort of see, as I've pasted that in here, we can see that PowerPoint's done a wonderful job of messing up the text in there. Why isn't this running? I cut and paste it straight in. It's like
never had that problem ever.
Never. Yeah. So that one's fairly straightforward, and I think I'm pretty sure most of you probably had some maybe some exposure to that one. So kind of a good starting point. Now this is where things really start to get way more interesting. So the Office Cloud Policy Service, this is starting to tie back into what Steve was talking about, where we're actually targeting the user with the policies we're creating rather than targeting the devices. So, and Steve, this is something you might be able to chime in on. It seems like the response is fairly ambiguous, but when we're choosing the groups that we want to target, are we targeting groups of users or groups of devices?
So you should be targeting users, is my understanding, because that's where you can target the non-corporate devices.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done with my testing, is that I've been targeting users. Where this gets interesting is if you have multiple mailboxes from multiple organizations signing into the one Outlook, which policy writes?
Sure.
It's typically the one that's licensed for it.
So basically, because I guess the other thing as well then, and this is something that I didn't see anything on, but let me just pull PowerPoint up so we can have a quick look. But over, where is it here? So the other thing, just to watch out for here is if you take a look at account, is if you've got secondary, which one is your primary account versus which one is your secondary account. So it's whichever one you're signing into. So in this case, you can see that this belongs to marcos@0oshay.com. So that means it's the policies from 0oshay.com that are going to come into this. Now, if I signed into so if we take a look here, you can see I've also just got an old Hotmail account in here. But if I signed into the Hotmail account first,
and it had a license,
and I had a license, So at that point, I think this policy would still apply because it's the first Azure AD sign in that it has to do, that it's processing.
That's right. It's the first licensed sign in. And I know I'm stressing licensed, but you need to have a license on the account signing in. If you're sitting there with, say, like an F1 license, you can't actually sign into Outlook anymore, which is interesting. Where you can also run into those issues is you've got a standard, you've got a shared account that has a mailbox attached to it. It needs to be properly licensed, not just a mailbox account and things like that.
So here, even though we are saying that, trying to be clear about it being based on, on the AAD account, user account. So I was sort of trying to be specific there about it being, user account, not device, for example. There's, if you are adding additional Azure AD accounts in, it's as Steve said, it's the licensed one. Now, it's not just on the Windows side. You've also got like Mac OS support, iOS and Android support. Once we jump in and take a look at the policies, you'll get to see that it tells you which ones you can target as you're going through this. Now, something that's important to note here, and this is where I could potentially see people starting to get a bit confused, is is if people see that we can go through and actually target, build XML files that are targeting the deployment of Office LTSC, you could then imagine that people would jump to the conclusion that, does that mean that people who've got Office with a year number can use the cloud policy service? And the answer is no. They have deliberately chosen not to use cloud first versions of Office. Therefore, you still have to rely on group policy. So this is something that I'm sure all of you are going to hit an experience with someone who's like, oh, the policies just aren't working. I stripped out all the group policy thinking that cloud policy would fix it, but now all of the devices are sitting there naked and exposed.
So, I mean, one of the good things about this, Mark, is that with the config XML, you can now natively state in that if it sees an old version of Office, that you can configure it to specifically force a removal of that before it does the install. So in that scenario, if you were in a migration process and it's 2022, I'm hoping that we're not still doing migrations away from the fat client of Office, but I'm sure we will.
A lot of people still in that situation, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, I mean, the good news is for anyone, if there's anyone on this call that is in that situation that's staring down the barrel of having to do a migration away from one of the year versions of Office, setting up this config file is actually really, really easy, to the point where you can even configure it to delete the old standalone clients of Publisher and Visio and stuff like that. So, the solution to sort of get away from that stuff is really easy. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out because it's a game changer as far as not having a headache when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so now the next bit. So this is also available in the Endpoint Manager Admin Center, but the good news is that it's the same policy. You'll see the same policies in both locations. So it's not one of those situations where you're basically seeing like a V1 implementation and a V2 implementation of something that don't communicate with each other. It's the same background service that's being accessed. The thing, though, if you're sort of thinking about it from the Intune side, is that generally with Intune, we'd probably be more likely to be doing device targeting potentially doing device targeting versus the user targeting here. And so this way, once again, basically targeting the user account is going to be a much better way of doing this. And this also ties back into one of the things that we mentioned right at the beginning, which is based on somebody's role, like somebody who just needs to do management of Office app configuration. We don't want to throw them into Intune without any ability to basically to go through and hide a whole bunch of things in the Endpoint Manager console. We have to give them the Endpoint Manager console if they're going to do it in Endpoint Manager. Yeah. This way, if we tell them to use this, they get something that is basically, well, there's not a huge number of things in here to hide. So even if they're only using a couple of them, that's still 30% of them. So versus you just using Office Policy Service and let's say doing Office deployments, like that would be like 1 millionth of Intune's functionality, and they'd still have to navigate everything to get to those locations.
Yeah. And or you'd have to create a scoped permissions to ensure that they only have access to that. That's the administrative overhead associated with that is complicated, especially for the fact that you can only have one Intune policy scoping or permissions type assigned per user.
Yeah.
So you can't even use it as a cumulative thing.
Yeah, I would suggest at this point, and feel free to correct me on this, but I mean, Office 365 is so simple to configure and to manage now that if you did run into scenarios where there was a specific person that was in charge of managing Office and the policies around that,
or showed interest in it, that you can just go, whoop.
Sure, you'd be like, welcome to the Intune team. So I would suggest that this portal would be great for organizations that don't necessarily have Intune or Config Manager configurations in place at the moment, but they still need a way to manage and deploy Office. there's going to be a very large group of small businesses that absolutely need the management platform to do Office, but why would they go into the nightmare that is full device management when all they need is Office? So I think this portal really solves that solution. But if I was still doing consultancy work and I ran into an organization that had an EUC team and an Office management team, I would be asking how we could potentially optimize those teams. Am I wrong?
No, depending on the size of the organization, it'll be split out. So I know organizations where a couple of thousand seats, but their Office configurations could be managed by their internal communication team, who want to make sure that this feature is enabled for this group of users in this schedule to make sure that there's training provided for them.
Sure.
And things like that. So that's where you see that separation of duty, especially when you start getting into larger organizations. You're going to have Office specialists that will go and write macros and things like that, that are pseudo IT, but not quite IT, and you don't necessarily want to trust them to have full
Keys
device
to the
management
kingdom.
permission.
Yeah, that's fair.
And also, it allows you to then have that organizational hierarchy of saying, look, I'm going to give you read access to Intune, but you can go and do a configuration change in Office.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. It
comes down to the size of org.
It does. I'm getting horror flashbacks from a small consulting firm that I did some work with. No one that anyone knows here, who got very excited about all of the different portals and set up Office deployments in Intune and here, and they set up a whole bunch of stuff in admin.microsoft.com, and I walked away.
Yeah, and there is that part of that conversation. But anyway, I keep cutting off
Mark.
Nandra.
Yeah, sorry guys, I have a quick question. I mean, I was in a similar situation where I had I was kind of thinking in the same way what Steve mentioned earlier, that the cloud policy might be useful to the BYOD and the CYOD devices, and also, but in the situation where I was before, the users are using the non-persistent devices in Azure. So that's something I was having a conversation with the customer that I think even if the non-persistent scenarios, because the question is, because they use the FS Logics profiles to manage the Office containers. So how does that behave for the users if there is any the user experience will be giving any delays or I mean the whole sort of the experience of the end user. So is there any impact in such a way of using these policies?
For like virtual machines that are non-persistent, you would generally have the application installed in a central location. So you could still use the Office config file from this portal to install the application.
It comes down to the settings is the conversation, right? So technically, yes, you could apply it. The config will apply depending on the settings. So there are some settings where you need to restart the Office application for them to apply. And that's not going to, that's a hard requirement. They're few and far between, but there are some that will need it. Otherwise, it downloads typically in a 1.5-ish time frame in my experience. So it's not instantaneous, and it comes down with, like, if they've gone and set their theming to dark theme. When they first open it up, it's going to be white, and then it's going to go across to dark. It's that type of time frame. So in that scenario, like, honestly, if you're doing a centrally configured policy, I would be putting in a group policy on my VDI to have that consistency. Yes, I hate group policy. I'm I loathe it. I really do, because it is a hit and hope technology. But in a scenario of a VDI, unless you're looking at things like W365, or you're going down AVD where you're wanting to do multi-session Windows 10,
Yeah,
that's where you start looking at group policy. If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
It's just from a consistency point of view, I think you're going to have that better experience.
That's right.
Unfortunately.
Okay, and just before we jump in and take a look at the cloud policy service and just run through a few of the pieces. The final point down here, just sort of watch out for this one. This one kind of goes against what normally we'd be doing here, because normally, we'd be saying don't assign roles to users, assign roles to groups, put users in the groups. But in this case, this is something that needs to be assigned directly. So this isn't mentioned this way in that is specifically in the documentation. I pasted the link in, but the way that I look at this is the thing that I'd assign directly to the user would be the lowest risk admin. So even if somebody has got group membership, basically group membership gives them global admin or security admin, for example, what is probably what I would sort of think about, I haven't sort of thought it completely through here, but for me, what seems to make sense here is give them the Microsoft 365 apps admin permission, assign it directly to the user account. That way you're meeting this requirement. Even though, yes, if you're using PIM, it's going to be complaining that you've assigned something directly to that way, etc. But that would be at least, I guess, one way where you could sort of do it as a lower risk, even because you could potentially be violating your own security policies by assigning the permissions directly to the user. Okay, so let's jump in. So hopefully we've got a bit more stuff coming through in here. So let's just jump in, and what do we want to have a look at? So policy config. So I've gone through and I've created one policy. It's one that I quite enjoyed creating. Let me just show you what's in here. Now let's just sort of talk through some of the pieces here. So even though I called it Windows, it doesn't have to just be Windows stuff. I'm just doing this to keep things separate. Now, in this case, you can see we get an option of the policy configuration applies to users in the specified group. Now down here, just to make sure I didn't do anything stupid here that then started impacting existing deployments, I just created a new group called empty, didn't add anyone to it, so that I can do it whatever stupid things I want here, and it's not actually going to impact anyone.
Very descriptive group name, Mark.
Yes, empty. But if you take a look at what the description of the group name is, it's empty group. So I was very consistent. Now the second option is where things get, where you start seeing the flexibility around this is, the policy configuration applies to users that access documents anonymously using Office on the web. So basically, again, here you can start seeing that it's not whether the device is managed. First of all, we're saying that it's being applied to users, but now we're saying that anyone who's coming on as an anonymous user, this policy is going to be applied to them when they are accessing, basically, Office on the web / the share, effectively, the SharePoint elements of that. So again, something that you'd need to sort of think about what you'd be implementing here, potentially being a lot more restrictive here if someone's doing something anonymously, just to make sure that, if you're trying to sort of prevent data leakage, etc., there could be some extra options in here. Now, on the policy side, there's a lot of different policies. I've only included one, and it's this one at the top. Do not allow an OST file to be created.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's if you're going to have one, I think that's a good one.
No, it's not important.
It's not important. Let the users do whatever they want.
Yeah. Chaos. Make it so they can have PSTs everywhere.
And
especially on network drives.
So then what you'll see here is then we can go through and basically it's showing us, in this case, you can see because I've chosen Windows, it's showing me the different Windows ones, but we can see what application is it being assigned to? Is it part of a security baseline? So there's a lot of different options in here, but effectively think of this as, you know, having a huge, like, I don't know whether it's fair to say it completely overlaps with group policy. It would not surprise me, like in most situations, if there are some things that are cloud only offered in here versus some things that only make sense on-prem that aren't included in here. But otherwise, you know, you've got almost 2,200 to start working with. But you can see here what applications it actually works with. Now, if we just go through,
the interesting part is that baseline there at the top, Mark.
So we can just see all of those instead. Yep.
Yeah.
And what we're saying around these baselines is these are the policies you should be setting to ensure that your environment's secure. Highly recommend setting all of these, including for the Windows 95 stuff. And you can just go in there and just go apply the recommended policy and it will configure it for you. Highly recommend it because it's being recommended for a reason.
Okay, so let's just quickly go to, we'll just create a new one. And I'll say that I want to target iOS. And we'll keep the scope the same. Oops, add group, I'll add it to empty again. Okay, it's not going to let me go all the way through, but okay. Okay, just make sure, yeah, make sure I don't save whatever I'm about to do. Let me just type in all users. Yeah, please don't let me. Actually, I don't.
Including guests. Wow.
Yeah.
That's adventurous.
Oh, that's a special purpose one. Yeah.
Yes.
Not to be confused with all users.
Yes.
Wow. So. Okay, so can we?
We have to.
Actually, oh no, that's okay. So yeah, so if we went through and created the new one, again, you can see that there's a lot of different ones. I was just seeing, can we actually filter based on platform? Yep, so we can. So,
yes. So, and also you should be able to hit the filter option next to search, and you do a new filter.
Oh, new filter. There we go. Yeah. So all I wanted to quickly show you here, even though we've got it over on the slide, is that yep, you've got your desktop and mobile platform supported, but also notice that you've got the web option in here as well. And going through filtering what apps, etc. So no shortage. Once again, if we just wanted to filter on security baselines, that's also available in here as an option for us as well. So I guess the thing here is you could see that when you are initially going and setting these up, if depending on how complex or how many options you're switching on, you'd really want to make sure that you're actually checking all the boxes, doing things properly as you're working your way through. And then just validating everything before you start rolling them out, especially if you're trying to replace group policy where things are configured properly. Just make sure that you're matching everything up properly before you do switch across.
Yep. What's the application, the second one there, with the head and the little speech box? I'm curious, is that Teams?
Where's that?
On the line where you are, allow users to provide feedback. Go right back to the top. All the way to the top.
This is a feedback icon.
Feedback icon. Okay, cool.
So the feedback portal is an app.
There you go.
I guess it is a web app. Yeah. So yeah.
And all apps are portals, as we've learned.
That's right.
Yeah. And all portals are apps.
Exactly.
Because they're all progressive web
all
apps.
apps require feedback.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get out of that one before I hit save. And Steve, do you want to talk about the priorities?
Put them in priority?
Yeah. So it's basically whatever gets processed first wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unlike
so,
group policy, which is whatever processed last wins.
Yeah. Okay. Now, up next, what have we got? So M365 Apps Health. So a few things that this will include. Now, here, so this is using Office, just the built-in Office diagnostic data or component. There's nothing extra that you need to install. Now, this is one of the ones where I was curious whether the business apps supported it as well, but it didn't mention that I think it said that they were supported. And the reason why I wanted to call that one out is that, so I guess this is probably, if we sort of think about all previous versions of, let's say maybe back in the Office Pro Plus timeframe, if you had the business version of Office, it didn't actually support that same diagnostic data telemetry consolidation. So even though it was built in, you couldn't actually leverage it the same way. So positive here is that it does actually support both. And so that's why I didn't bother calling it out, is that it's something that I expected to be different here, but it's not. Now, the idea with the Apps Health is so that we can start seeing trends over time. So basically, are we seeing more crashes than we have, fewer crashes, etc.? And the idea here is that we can start seeing, okay, when did the changes occur? And then we can start reverse engineering it, going, okay, what happened during that time frame? If it was something that happened immediately after machines got an Office update, then it's like, okay, it was probably the Office update. But what about if it happens 2 weeks after Office was last updated? Then at that point, it's what else has changed inside your organization. So they actually give you, so let me just drop the docs page in to chat. But on that page, they actually give you, and this is something that you'll notice in some of these articles, there's a lot more detail than you'd actually expect. So they give you a lot of, some good starting points as to what to start looking for. Now, other things that you'll see in here is things like the overview page, the app currency. So we can jump in and take a look at that. Now, we're not going to see too much actually happening in this tenant because the VMs don't get turned on all that often. But if we just jump in and let's jump into the Apps Health, hopefully we've got something showing up in here. I guess this is positive. There are no significant deterioration advisories.
Yes.
So I guess that's a positive. Now, 0% of the devices in your tenant over the last 14 days were on recommended channels, because generally I'd be on beta or current preview, depending on how I'm targeting them. So I quickly switched a few over, or a bunch of them over, to monthly enterprise before the session, but it doesn't look as if they've actually reported through yet. But also down here, you'll start seeing information about, over the last 14 days, 75% not on latest builds. And I was wondering why that was. And when I went back in, it's because VMs have been turned off. The last version they reported in within the last 30 days was a previous version of beta or current channel preview, which would be outdated on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on which one it was. And then that would then also lead into on unsupported builds, because you don't have to, a machine that's got beta that's offline for 2 weeks would show up as being on an unsupported build. Now, if we take a look at the analysis, then this is sort of showing, okay, so this is basically showing you what I was just saying. So, the reason why I wasn't on was we've got 2 in current channel preview, 2 in beta channel. Now, there should be, if I sort of remember to fire up all the VMs earlier, there would have been a bunch more starting to light up in here. But in this case, we'll see that it'll get a bit more mixed depending on how quickly things report through here. So from there, you can see that we can start digging in, starting to see some of the stats. We're not seeing any issues here, so there's no deterioration. But if we just jump in across the different tabs across here, you can see what apps. Okay, I'm actually impressed. Actually, oh no, that's just how many times I launch it.
Yeah.
Because
Which is cool.
Outlook runs.
How live is this data? or responsive, I guess?
Well, it's within the last 14 days.
Okay.
So the numbers that they're showing me aren't really a surprise.
Yeah, sure.
No, I do not use Access or OneNote or Publisher. Kind of weird that I guess maybe they don't include Teams in here because they just assume that Teams
Well, you can never
launches
shut it down.
automatically.
Teams auto starts.
Yeah.
And it's also not technically part of 365 installer. It's just an additional thing.
It's a checkbox.
It's a checkbox now, yes. But anyway, whatever.
Anyway, well, let's not go down that journey.
Okay, so then you can start to see. So this is where you start to get a bit more of a breakdown of, the different builds, etc. So you can see here that all of these are, more advanced than 2205, which is what this month's monthly enterprise build is. But again, you can see we can start digging in on a build by build basis. Now, in this case, in such a small environment, you're not going to get a huge amount of value out of this. But in a larger environment, this is something that, within a few days of these updates being rolled out, you are going to know very quickly if there are issues in here. Even if users aren't reporting them, you are going to see them in here. And then we can also see what add-ins are in use. Are they affecting reliability? Now, in this case, you can see that I've got a few different versions. Apparently, I've got a few different versions of the AIP client floating around. So I'm guessing it's just, once again, machines that were offline that didn't get updated versions pushed out through Windows Update, etc. That would be the reason. But no crashes to report in there. Mm-hmm. And then no advisories. I guess the reason why I don't have advisories would be because I'm not on semi-annual. Is it fair to say that if you're on semi-annual, you could be 6 months behind in terms of things being patched?
Well, and also you're typically either on current or beta, so therefore there's not going to be any advisories for those.
Everything's going to get they'll get updates next day basically. So again, I was hoping the other clients sort of started reporting in a little bit faster, but that's on me. I forgot to fire up VMs a few days back to sort of give plenty of time for everything to start reporting through. But if we sort of just jump back then, so some of the things there that you can see, so basically we sort of just covered these second pieces. So the app health, the app currency. So everything's, even though it's not happy with the versions of the apps that I'm running because it wants me to be on current or monthly enterprise. Yes. I prefer to live dangerously.
Just for everybody's reference, you should only be running Insider on less than 1% of your organization, unless you're a dev-heavy organization. Just putting it out there. Not like Mark with 75%.
Look, all of my Windows machines are on Insiders. So why shouldn't I thought you were supposed to use the version of Office or M365 apps that matched what Windows version you were running, like LTSC plus LTSC.
True. No, that's fair. That's fair.
Insider. That seems logical to me.
Yes.
So there's not really any onboarding because it's just when the user is signing in, it's that user credential that's driving this.
Yeah. So it's part of the thing that I will call out though is if you have traditionally turned off or blocked diagnostics from Office and Microsoft, this won't work because we're leveraging that Office diagnostic data. So that would be the caveat that I just want to call out there is if you've got that blocked on your network for whatever reason, unblock it, and then you'll have the ability to capture it. Otherwise, you're only going to get part of your story. But otherwise, the onboarding process, as Mark said, you just sign into the app.
And effectively, I guess this is, that's basically, it's like the equivalent of going back to like Windows Analytics and Upgrade Analytics. It was the same thing. You had to be at there was a minimum level you could be at to get something in, but there's a preferred level of telemetry reporting to get everything that you need here. And I think even if let me just pull up that. Actually, I don't have that page loaded. Let me just into the app health. Telemetry is not in there. Okay, so there we go. So yeah, powered by Office diagnostic data. Let's just find the next. Let's see where it gives us. Okay, so send at least required diagnostic data. So let's take a look at what that means. So let me just drop that link into chat for you as well. So yeah, so this, looks like this looks like a conversation all to itself. So we won't. I thought that might be a couple of pages. That looks like a couple of hundred of. Yeah, let's
507 minutes to read.
Yeah. I'm a fast reader. I'll do it in 500. And that one
we're going to be racing it. We're going to be racing it like we do with the GPS.
Yeah.
So I feel really sorry for the single contributor who is responsible for this page.
Oof.
Okay, so let's get that out of the way. Okay, so again, like not all that useful in an environment where it's primarily one user doing things, but with a couple of different versions of Office. But so I guess even here, what you'll like a nice thing to sort of think about here is that if you can move away from semi-annual versions, this stuff is going to get a lot cleaner as soon as you do that conversion, because things like a lot of the advisories aren't going to apply any longer. So it's almost like you're getting a free boost. Well, you are getting a free. It's not almost. You actually are. Yeah.
Yep. You're using what you're paying for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So then up next we've got Insight. So with this, so we've got the inventory insight. We've got Office build spread, so that we can actually sort of see how spread out things are. Now, even though we sort of saw some of that previously, we can start seeing it just being presented in different ways. We can see what channels are in use. We can see the devices. And with this device lists, I guess with this, you're going to see a list of devices that is potentially going to be quite different to any other list of devices you see inside of your organization. Especially, hopefully, or primarily when you're like, so I guess the first thing is like you could find that you've got like corporate issued devices that for some reason have fallen out of whatever management process you were using. So they'll start showing up. So even things that you used to see would be someone saying, I'm not going to join my work machine to the domain. I'm just going to run as, cache my credentials, and avoid all of that. So that device would never appear in any management portal, and the user was very, very proud of themselves. So this way we could start collecting, information about, well, based on what we're seeing, we're pretty sure that should be that user's work device. But also, I guess where you're more likely to see it these days would be BYOD or home use scenarios, where you're going to start seeing a lot of additional devices appearing in here. So
unless you've put in conditional access that stops people from signing in, unless it's a compliant device.
Okay,
which I do know organizations that do that, or they're using MCAS to stop you from doing it.
Yeah.
What's the name for MCAS now? Defender for Cloud Apps?
Something for Excel.
Yeah.
Yes. I got it right.
Yeah. Not Defender for Cloud. That's a different
Cloud
one.
Apps.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So we can sort of so here you can start seeing that I've got a few things lighting up. So basically I sort of had to do some dumb things with Office before we kick this session off to start getting to try to get a little bit more diversity in here. So I've got it up to 3 channels.
Good to see you're very inclusive.
Yes. But you can see the builds, you can see what devices now, because some of these machines, I was trying to figure out why haven't some of these machines reported through, because there should actually be 12 autopilot VMs, not 2 of them. And I realized it's because apart from these 2, I don't think any have either been running long enough for things to happen, or alternatively, I don't think I've actually signed into them. I've just sort of been letting them do upgrades and things. So it's probably, yeah, a combination of both of them. And over here, you can see that, once we start taking a look, you can see, what's happening with these devices. We can see that I've got, at least one machine where macros have been used. We can see, last contact, etc. So this time tomorrow, this will light up with, 3 times as many devices as it's got now, which won't really help us at all. But from here, if we just sort of jump in and take a look at them, then it just goes through and it starts giving you a bit more information. Now, if you start seeing, so this is where if you start seeing things that don't conform to your company's naming standards, for example, and you click on it and go, well, hang on, that is still this is the model and manufacturer that we provide to people inside of our organization, then that's starting to tell me that, maybe Mark is doing that non-domain join thing. So basically this is a way that you could sort of start, on the security side, this would be a way to start figuring out some of those things that could actually slip under the radar elsewhere. But remember though that we're still targeting these if we've got the appropriate policies coming down to them. So yes, it helps to identify some potential security issues, but it also gives us the ability to do something about it. Okay, I don't think there's anything. Actually, nothing else down here. Yes, my favorite add-in, the Exchange add-in for Outlook, is on here. I thought that should be in there somewhere.
What about the Microsoft Data Streamer for Excel? That looks very important.
Do you know what it does? It streams data to Excel from Microsoft.
Oh, is that what it does?
I was really hoping there'd be an explanation of what it was in here. It's the new video streaming service, but it's only data. So it looks like the Matrix. Okay. So once again, in a production environment, you'd see some interesting stuff in there, as opposed to, oh look, I'm using whatever is normally provided inside of the apps apart from AIP. And I think the only reason an AIP client is even getting pushed out is because I've had it being pushed out by Intune for the last 5 years or whatever.
Yep. Makes sense.
Okay, so here on the servicing profile, so let's just jump out to have a look at something quickly here before we talk about it. So here we've got servicing, and you'll notice that we have one profile. Now, before you start poking around saying, where do I create servicing profiles for the others? This is it. You get monthly enterprise. And I'll let Steve, do you have to tread carefully here, Steve? Yeah, okay. So Steve won't talk. You probably should turn your camera off so that body language doesn't give anything away. Okay, no. So let's talk about it. So why is monthly? No, you can turn it back on. So why monthly enterprise? Well, obviously it's the one that they want you. It's the one that they really want people to consider using if they're not already using it, unless they're using something a bit more. Unless they're using current. Current. So with this one, it's obviously, I don't think they've said that they're not doing the others, but in terms of what's most important to them is monthly enterprise. So you might as well go through and make sure that monthly enterprise is working the way that you want it in the servicing profile before trying to roll out all of the others. And I think once you start getting into semi-annual, that starts to complicate some of the things because of the range of time that different versions can be current, etc. There's some potential reporting issues there versus how things are currently built in here. So in this case, it's kind of like it's the priority. It's the one that they want you to be using. So it really makes sense here. Now down here, what you'll see is that it's gone through and it's detected that a few of those machines that I had machines that were on current channel preview earlier today that I flipped across to semi-annual so that they could then get picked up by this as being targets. Now, as we go through, you'll see that you'll sort of see what I mean by how we can actually choose the targets as we start going through some of the other options. Now, here under the devices, as I mentioned, there should be, there's another 10 autopilot VMs that should be coming through to this, but those VMs just haven't been in the appropriate state to report through. But the fact that these are configured and reporting is telling me that the others are going to appear at some point in time. So you can see that the updates haven't started in here yet. We can take a look at any issues. No issues apart from me not firing things up. Now, here's where we get to go through and start configuring things. So let me just get that out of the way so we can see a little bit more. I'll drop, actually 125 will do. So a couple of important things here then. So starting off with devices. So good news here is that initially we only had an option of including all devices, which was, let's say, a brave choice, unless it was something that worked well for your organization. Then choose groups to include was added in preview, and that was something that went in quite recently. Because I think I think that was like March or April, that went from preview to generally available. So do we want to use additional criteria to select the devices? So do I want to exclude any devices? So if I've got specific groups of devices that I do want to keep out of it. So ones where it's like, yeah, let's keep away from that group of devices. Now, this is the thing where you can sort of see here that it gets a bit confusing in the portal, because some of these things do target devices and some of them do target users. So in this case, we're targeting devices that we know are doing something specific. So someone is stuck on semi-annual because they're basically running a lot of older macros. They're running some add-ins that are sensitive that tend to break when someone sneezes near the computer.
Let's call it the finance department.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that way we can, say, okay, look, your groups, your devices will go through, we'll target those separately. Now down here, this is where we can start choosing the channels that we want to target. So if I really want to get everyone in the organization onto monthly enterprise, I could choose beta channel current and current channel as well. And that means that everybody is now going to get moved across to monthly enterprise. But what I prefer to do here is like, generally speaking, if I've got something that's being updated more aggressively, I've made a deliberate decision about that, and I don't want this thing to override it. So in this case, you can see that even here, what you can see here is that just through the recommendations is they're saying, yeah, look, if someone's on something that's updated more frequently than monthly enterprise, they're not the top concern, is probably a good way to put it. Now, other things that you'll see in here is, making sure that, let's say if you're someone saying, I don't trust that 5 gig is enough space. I want to make sure that, there's at least 10 gig of space on the devices that we're targeting. And then down here, this is why that macro reporting is important here. So this is where we can also start getting more, targeting, or excluding devices where we do see that macro usage. Now down here, I guess if someone was saying that let's target all devices, the logic in my head would tell me to exclude devices with macro usage. Because if I'm just basically trying to catch everyone in one go, the macro usage users would be the ones that are going to be more problematic in that case. But in this case, like if we know that everything's good, we sort of have run all the appropriate tools over the years. We've got people who've sort of updated things. We should be okay. And then for add-ins, if we know that there are any specific add-ins that break, now I guess like we haven't moved away from a world yet where all add-ins are coming from the Office App Store. I think all of us could probably go through and actually I don't know if I've got Camtasia installed on this machine, but it's a perfect example of something that, it would add its own recording option into PowerPoint, for example.
Yeah.
So that way, with any add-in installed. Any add-in isn't very specific. Like I think excluding devices with any add-in would mean you'd end up updating or downgrading or cross-grading, I guess. That would probably eliminate a lot more devices than you might expect in there. Now, we've got a few more options across here then. So the first one is rollout waves. So if we've got a large number of devices, we can go through and start saying that, look, let's start creating maybe one, maybe multiple rollout waves, so that we'll start saying, okay, X number of machines will get it on day one, X or X% of machines will get it on day two, etc. So it will just go through and do that so that you don't have everyone sort of competing for network bandwidth, etc. at the same time. But also it means that if something does go wrong, you've got the ability to go through and roll back more easily as well. Now there is a rollback option in here as well. So, but I don't think I've got, actually, let me just go to devices quickly. Actually, yeah, because no, actually, I can't show you, actually, or can I show you rollback? I think rollback is potentially going to be, actually, no, it's telling me that, okay, up here, you can see that it's telling me that I've got 0 machines that qualify for rollback. Because they haven't been updated, they would need to be updated before I could actually roll them back. So, oops.
And updated recently. It's the same sort of rollback scenario you get with Windows feature updates. The other reason why you might want waived deployments is so if you're making a major change, you can catch it before it hits everybody. And also for content distribution, you need to make sure you have delivery optimization enabled, and Office will honor that and share your content between all the devices.
It's really important to do that.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah.
How many times have we been stung by aggressive bandwidth throttling?
Yeah,
and
no
fix your
Windows
DNS.
updates. No Windows updates for 20 hours per day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and fix your DNS.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then other things in here is we can put in exclusion windows. Now, Steve, did we get an answer as to what dates these actually are? Seeing that it's saying 7/13, I'll assume it's the US. So do we know?
I don't know. I think it's local time to the device from memory.
Actually, but I'm sure we could probably find. We might be able to find that out by clicking on that link.
UTC.
Ah, okay. So
not the
UTC, not okay. So just bear that one in mind, because I could see that one
very important.
That one causing harm for people. And the other thing as well here is this gives you the ability to do some things that you probably shouldn't. Now, how long can we actually? Let me just. I'm curious as to how far into the future. Okay, so I was wondering if it would give you an unlimited amount of time, but it looks like it gives you about 6 weeks that you can actually exclude. Let me just try that. Did it work? It did. Oh no, sorry. Oh no, 4. Is it 4 weeks or? Okay, no. So it's okay. So it's roughly a 4-week window or a 1-month window, which for monthly enterprise makes sense. So let me get rid of that so it doesn't cause me harm in the future, in the very, very near future.
What are you talking about? Won't cause any problems at all.
No. And then finally for the, this is only going to affect the VMs. So that's okay. Sometimes I do make the right decisions around targeting. And then finally for the update deadline, you can see here, we can take it all the way up to 2 weeks, but this is pretty much the, like where once it starts getting closer to the actual end time period, it's going to start giving you pop-up reminders, letting you know that, okay, Office needs to be updated. You need to either shut down all your Office apps, or you need to shut down and restart your machine, whichever comes first. But then eventually we'll get to the point where it says, where the buzzer gets to, or the counter gets to 0, and it says, congratulations, we are restarting your Office apps now. And if you're in the middle of something, well, you had enough notice beforehand. And yes, you can complain about it, but people will not take pity on you.
Correct.
People will say, which part of this needs to be done in 2 days did you not understand? So anything else on servicing profiles that you want to throw in there, Steve?
No, I think that covers it pretty well.
Okay. Now, I think for the final piece then, so this is the last thing then that we'll cover for today, is the OneDrive sync health. Do you want to talk about
anything you take out of this session? Turn this on. Period. It's not even a conversation. Sorry, Mark. I know I'm cutting you off here, but
no. Well, this is the one that I know you're very passionate about. So, yeah. So I wasn't sure if. Yeah, so I kind of just assumed that you would have a lot to say on this one.
Yep. So how many people have done deployments where they're doing changeovers and they don't know if profiles have synced, whether it was folder redirections, OneDrive, all of this you didn't know. And before this solution, how you could tell if a device, if OneDrive was in sync, and I'm not joking here, is you had to pull down a process that would go and look at the icon that sits on top of the overlay, the overlay that sits on top of the icon to see if the drive was in sync or not.
Literally checking to see whether there was an image there. Hey, I'm just going to interrupt you really quickly. Robert's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Were you putting your hand up to say that you've had those issues?
You have the floor, Robert. Maybe he's got shy.
Got shy. If you come back, let me know and I'm happy to drop. But one of the things to note here with the OneDrive Sync Health is not only will it tell you if your device is not in sync, it will tell you why it's not in sync. And it will call out if known folder move has not been enabled correctly and which folders. And then you also have the ability to make sure that they're on the right version of the sync agent. It is, I cannot stress this enough. This is going to save your life. Yeah. And to set it up, it's super straightforward. What we do is we go to the setup option down the left, and then we grab that key and we go and deploy it either via group policy or via Intune. But if you're doing a migration from one tenant to one platform to another, where you have to reset the device, where you're having to do anything around the device, swap and go or whatever, this gives you the confidence to go, yep, it's in sync or it's not in sync. Yeah, like I know I'm being very, very direct on this one, but it's going to make your life easier and give you that information. Like I had an organization recently, they had 6,000 devices and they had issues with their pre-existing platform. When we went and looked in the OneDrive Health Sync report, they had over 2,000 devices with issues.
It's crazy.
And they didn't know. And this is where you can't expect your users to know that they need to go and look at the error message down there and make sure it's synced, because that's not their job. Their job is to put data into Excel, put data into emails. It's not to go and make sure devices are syncing. So this is why that OneDrive sync report is just so important. Sorry, yes. I'll get off my soapbox now.
See, so now I've just created some work for myself, because of course, looking at this, I can see that, the profile, one of the machines it hasn't applied to, so I need to figure out why. So thank you. Now I have to go and figure that out. So I'll blame you for that, Steve.
You're welcome.
Because it couldn't possibly have been anything that I did here. But yeah, so that's just set down here. So you can see that I just pulled that out of settings catalog. So it's in there. It's ready to go. Now so I thought I had this set in this tenant previously, but I actually did not have it set up. I had part of it set up, but I didn't actually have it assigned to a group. So that would be why when I jump back down here into Think Health, it's like, why on earth am I not getting anything? Because I thought at least I'd get a couple of those machines coming through. But no, that was user error, not actually targeting the devices properly.
Yep.
Do you have one of these where things are broken, or a screenshot where?
Don't think I do. Let me see if Intune training might have something.
Oh, there we go. Okay. That's not very nice.
No, it's wrong portal we on. Admin.office.
Okay, so here's what it will look like if you do have reports coming through. Now, this is just a general question that I've got for everyone: is how often do you actually see OneDrive sync issues? Is it just really a numbers game that if someone's got a lot of clients, there's a chance that they'll see them?
Yep.
Sorry, I had a double mute on before. I've seen it a lot. We had a lot of users with hundreds of gigs sitting in my documents folders.
Mm-hmm.
And a limit of an upload of 610 kilobytes a second. So we worked it out. It was one user would take about 3 months to sync their OneDrive correctly. So yes, I've seen it a lot. And I wish I knew about this before, because it would have been really handy.
Yeah, and that's that's what I love. Yeah. It's good when there's something like this where it's like, oh crap, I could it would have been great to have it at the time, but knowing that it's there for the next time you encounter it is going to save so much pain.
We do have a video on it.
Cool.
Ben's sitting there and pinging me on the back end.
On a different chat.
Yes. So basically what Ben's pinged me on is that we should have an Intune training video on this, which we do. And we also had the Office Rangers on talking about it.
Nice.
Part of what this comes down to, and I just had a look in the Intune training tenant, we don't have anything in there, otherwise I'd show you that, Mark. But one caveat, and it's going to be fixed, but one caveat right now is if you go to the details tab or the issues tab, you can't actually export them. So from a from a maintenance point of view, to be able to pull that information out and put it into an Excel spreadsheet or go and raise tickets for your team to go and action them, it's not there right now.
So I guess that
it is something that the Office Rangers said that it is under consideration.
Yeah.
But from a timing point of view, your knowledge may vary.
So is this available through Graph? Anything through here?
I'm going to go with no. It won't be using Graph for this data, which is the primary reason why we can't export it out.
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah, we'll talk. We'll talk when we've stopped recording, Steve.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
Yeah, because I guess that's the other thing now is with anything like this. Like it's like all the other, like when you sort of see other portals where they just give you such simple ways of exporting out to log analytics or to a storage account or whatever, you notice it when it's not available for you a lot more than you used to.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it's not here, because that's the kind of thing that when I was expecting something like that to be in setup, because I'd assume that something here like the tenant is like whenever I see something like this, I just automatically assume that there's probably a log analytics workspace sitting somewhere behind the scenes, even though that is not a log analytics key. It doesn't mean there's some black magic going on that's going to turn that into the key and the workspace ID. Okay, so that pretty much, actually, so let me just sort of show that final thing then. Do I still have Endpoint Manager open? I do. So let me just jump back into that OneDrive Sync admin reports, just so we can have a quick look down here. So I mentioned that this is coming in from configuration settings.
And you'll note that Mark targeted the wrong group there. He's targeting all users. We all know you do not target all users.
Oh no, no. In this environment, you do though, yes. because it's going to be me.
Don't do as I do. Do as I say.
Yes. Okay. So let's just edit that. Okay. So basically, here you can just see that it's, yeah. We just go through and we go through and paste it. And I guess this is the other thing that I think it's fair to say. This probably needs to be fixed because I view this as broken.
What's broken about it?
The fact that I need to take a tenant key in. Sure. It's like, well, if these things can communicate with each other.
Why does it look like a JWT token?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Just keep that there because when we finish recording, I want to get that key.
Okay. I'll send it to you via our other chat mechanism.
Area Pigeon.
Yeah, Pigeon mail, please.
Yeah. So because there have been other things because remember we used to have to add these details into or similar stuff. We used to have to add it into Intune for Defender for Endpoint integration before it actually had Defender for Endpoint integration. So anytime that we don't have to cut and paste keys, especially if it does things like you mentioned, Steve, where it's potentially looking at the user account you signed in with to pull this page up, and you're just randomly copying and pasting it in, and at some point in the future you realize the machines are reporting through to the wrong tenant.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty much it then in terms of, I guess everything that I wanted to go through. So I guess what we can do now is we'll stop the recording just so that if there's any kind of off-camera, non-recorded questions that anyone's got, we can sort of just spend a few minutes going through those. So let me just cancel or stop this recording, and then we can just
Bye, recording people.
So